Pokemon Stadium is a Nintendo 64 game which was released way back in 1999, smack at the beginning of the first wave of Pokemon hype. It's not exactly the most challenging game to beat, although there are definitely tricky parts, and if you don't know what you are doing, you will not be able to clear it completely. Now, if you're rocking a Mewtwo and some other A-listers, the main game, the Gym Leader Castle, won't be much of a challenge. What if you deliberately handicap yourself and limit your options to Pokemon which aren't considered all too great, such as the 3 starter Pokemon Charizard, Blastoise and Venusaur? Is it possible to beat the Gym Leader Castle round 2 using only these 3? Let's find out. Before we get started, let's go over some differences between doing one of these challenges in Pokemon Stadium compared to doing them on the main games. The main difference is probably the fact that you can't out-level your way to victory. In the handheld games, you can probably beat them with just, say, a Ghastly by grinding a lot and giving it a 30 plus level advantage versus the opponents. Not so in Pokemon Stadium, where every opponent is of an equal level, 100. Furthermore, you cannot use items in battle, nor can they be equipped. The next big difference is that you can never fully plan a strategy to beat a certain gym leader, as they always pick 3 out of a roster of 6, which means there are plenty of different options and you can't accurately predict which team you'll face. And then there's the matter of movesets. When playing a handheld game, you learn new moves, find TMs, and can generally change your moveset as you go along, tailoring it to the situation. In Stadium, your Pokemon get one moveset only, and that's all the moves they'll have for the entire challenge. As you can tell, there are plenty of differences and disadvantages, but the main advantage in Stadium is that you can at least play with fully optimized Pokemon. Best moves, the best stats. Finally, in order to beat Stadium's Gym Leader Castle, there's a round 1 and a round 2. Round 1 is generally pretty easy and serves as a warm-up and a trial by fire for your team. Round 2 is usually where the real challenge lies. Okay, let's take a look at our current competitors. Charizard, Blastoise and Venusaur are the final evolutions of the 3 starter Pokemon Charmander, Squirtle and Bulbasaur. They're iconic Pokemon and have seen many changes throughout the years and the various generations of Pokemon games. Generation 1, however, they're not that awesome. They're okay, but not great. In general, their movesets are limited, so type coverage isn't broad, and they share some weaknesses and lack useful resistances. For example, here are the types which these 3 combined have no access to: Psychic, Electric, Poison, Rock, and Bug. Sure, Bug and Poison aren't useful, but the lack of a Psychic, Electric, or Rock move is pretty annoying. Let's look at them in more detail now. Blastoise is a pure water type, a decent Pokemon but by no means excellent. With a base stat total of 425, most of its stats are average at best, with only defense hitting a respectable 100. Blastoise can take hits due to only having 2 weaknesses, Electric and Grass, and resisting Fire, Water and Ice, but its offense is pretty lacking. It doesn't learn anything except water and normal type moves by leveling up, but fortunately there are some good TMs it can learn, such as Body Slam, Submission, Earthquake and Dig, which is 100 base power in this generation, and most importantly, Blizzard and Ice Beam. Here's the moveset I ended up going for: Hydro Pump, Blizzard, Mimic, and Body Slam. I picked Mimic because I thought it would function like in the handheld games, where you get to choose one of the opponent's moves to learn, but unfortunately in Stadium, it just randomly picks one for you, which is completely useless 90% of the time. The Grass Poison type Venusaur is one of my all-time favorites, and it's a pretty decent Pokemon in Gen 1, but like Blastoise, it's not going to be hitting any records with a base stat total of 425. It's decently bulky, with a 4 times resistance to Grass, and resisting Water, Electric and Fighting. However, it is weak to Fire, Ice, Flying, Psychic and Bug. Blastoise does cover 2 of those weaknesses, and the others aren't very common. It has the highest special of the 3 starters, but it doesn't have the moveset to complement this at all. It only learns Grass and normal damaging moves while leveling up, of which the 55 base power Razor Leaf is the best stab option it gets. This low base power is fortunately compensated by a very high crit rate. Venusaur's speed is only base 80, but even so, Razor Leaf crits nearly all the time. Its TM move pool is very shallow and fits in a single screenshot. Here again, the only damaging moves it can learn are Grass or Normal type, which does not provide it with great coverage at all. This means I'll have to give it some status or utility moves, and I ended up going for Razor Leaf, Body Slam, Mimic, and Leech Seed. And finally we come to Charizard. A fire, flying, fan favorite, a typing which leaves it vulnerable to water, electric and ice, and 4 times weak to rock. It resists fire and fighting, is 4 times resistant to grass and fighting, and is immune to ground. Charizard is definitely the most offensively geared of the three, good speed and decent attack and special. Its coverage in general is okay, but not great. As with the other two, Charizard doesn't learn any other attacking moves while leveling up, except fire and normal, not even a flying attack. Its TM moveset is better, and it has access to some great physical moves like Body Slam, Submission, and Earthquake. I ended up going for Fire Blast, Submission, Earthquake, and Sword Stance. Overall, while the three starters aren't amazing, they do complement each other rather well and have some definite advantages versus some gym leaders. If we go over the roster of the gym leaders, it's immediately obvious which of them will be easy and which might give us problems. Okay, let's get straight into it and see what happens. As predicted, Brock wasn't a problem. For round 1, he went with Onix, Ammonite, and Kabuto. Venusaur's Razor Leaf just sliced through them with ease. Round 2 was a bit of a different story. He started off with Golbat, so I had to withdraw Venusaur. Fortunately, it just went for Bite, and Charizard was able to kill it with 2 Fire Blasts. Onix followed, whose Rock Slide didn't do much to Venusaur. Needless to say, Razor Leaf took care of him, and likewise with Dugtrio. 1 down, 7 to go. Round 1 Misty led with Horsey, which fell to 1 Razor Leaf. The Starmie outsped my Venusaur and proceeded to paralyze it with Thunder Wave, rendering it useless this first turn. Fortunately, Starmie didn't go for Psychic, and Swift did nothing. Razor Leaf killed it, and same for the Seal. Round 2, however, was a bit more problematic. As you can see here, she's got a lineup of Starmie, Executor, Seadra, Dugtrio, Blastoise, and Dugong. Quite the upgrade. I started off with Charizard, thinking it could potentially take out her Executor, or at least put a dent in the water types, allowing Venusaur to finish them off. It didn't go as planned, as she led with Starmie and I had to switch out into Venusaur. Hydro Pump crit and did around 40% of my HP. Ouch. Of course, now it went for Psychic, which nearly took out Venusaur. My Razor Leaf failed to kill it, so then I had a choice. Sacrifice Venusaur or switch out and keep it for her next Pokemon. Charizard survives the critical hit Psychic and gets its special dropped, which means the next Psychic easily will take it out. Blastoise was the only real option at this point and promptly gets paralyzed in turn 1. Psychic lowers its special and it's paralyzed again. Psychic lowers its special again, and at this point I've got 2 Pokemon left at low HP, one of which is paralyzed. She sent out her Seadra, whose Surf I should be able to tank easily if it wasn't for the double special drop. Venusaur outspeeds, but fails to one-shot the Seadra, whose Ice Beam seals my fate. Okay, let's try this again. On my next attempt, I decide to lead with Blastoise, thinking I can at least damage the Starmie a bit, which is what happens. But of course it crits again, drops my special, and takes me out before I can do more than slightly dent it. I've got no choice but Venusaur now. Starmie lowers my special again? Seriously? But fortunately dies to Razor Leaf and Blastoise's sacrifice. She brings out her Executor, just a normal day in the life of a water-type gym leader. I have to switch into Charizard because Venusaur can't hurt it at all. Charizard takes the Psychic much better than expected, but its Fire Blast misses. Executor takes the coward's way out and explodes in my face, leaving me with yellow HP Venusaur versus her Seadra. I know Razor Leaf isn't a one-hit knockout, but what other option is there? If this Ice Beam doesn't crit, I should have it in the bag, and it doesn't. I'm wary of using another 95% accurate Razor Leaf, so I decide to finish it with a Body Slam. A victory, but a very, very close one, which leaves me mildly uncomfortable, considering this is only the second gym leader and was supposed to be a cakewalk. Redundant Surge round 1 went better than expected. Charizard was able to take out Magneton with 2 Earthquakes, but it brings me low enough for me to have to switch into Venusaur to avoid getting killed by Electrode. It self-destructs, but Venusaur takes it like a champ. Raichu outspeeds, body slams, crits, and paralyzes me, before finishing it off with another body slam. At this point, I've got a low HP Charizard and a Blastoise left against a reasonably fast electric type. Charizard fortunately outspeeds, brings it low with Earthquake before dying to Surf. Blastoise barely tanks a Thunder, which would have killed me if it crit, and he wins the match. Pretty close. Round 2 wasn't a success by any means. I actually lost multiple times due to a combination of unlucky crits, paralysis, and a surprisingly strong Amnesia Poliwrath. On my third attempt, his Tangela looked like easy prey for Charizard, but not only does it tank a Fire Blast, it paralyzed me and then abused Bind. Venusaur outsped and was able to take it out. It gets paralyzed by Raichu, but manages to Razor Leaf its way through. Lickitung's Blizzard hit pretty hard, but I set up Leech Seed before sacrificing Venusaur. Charizard was able to narrowly kill it. A victory, but I think if he had used Poliwrath again, I'd have another loss on my hands. Anyway, a win's a win, so moving on. In round 1, Erika has a team consisting of 6 weak grass types, so I don't foresee a great amount of trouble. Execute and Gloom get roasted by Fire Blast, but Tangela evades the attack and paralyzes and then binds me. This is very annoying in Generation 1. I switch out and let Blastoise finish it with 2 Blizzards. Round 2 is more varied, throwing in a Water and Normal type. We start off with Charizard versus Vileplume, a rather favorable matchup for me. However, it ends up paralyzing me, which makes me slightly uncomfortable keeping Charizard in versus the Clefable and its broad coverage moves. Venusaur gets hit by an Ice Beam and 2 Psychics, but managed to bring it down to low yellow HP before biting the dust. I thought this would be enough for Charizard's submission to finish it off, but it manages to live on 2 HP and then Thunderbolts me down. Blastoise fortunately outspeeds, kills it, and is faced with Executor. Oh shit, this isn't really going in my favor anymore. It doesn't help that Blizzard misses the first time, and fails to bring it below 50% the second time. Its Psychics bring me down to 94 HP, and now I need a crit or lose. Unfortunately, Blizzard ends up critting and getting me another victory. Koga was one of the gym leaders I expected the most trouble from, and in round 1 his team consists of a Weezing, Venomoth, and Nidorina. Not exactly stellar Pokemon, but they have pretty broad coverage and super effective moves against my team. Weezing doesn't die to 2 of Charizard's Earthquakes, who bites the dust after 2 Thunderbolts. Venusaur can clean up with a Body Slam and faces Venomoth, a weak Pokemon by any standard, but I don't really have anything to hit it with, so I just Leech Seed before getting put to sleep. Venomoth Psybeams me, crits, and I decide to switch into Blastoise. Blizzard brings it down to yellow HP, and Hydro Pump finishes it off. Out comes Nidorina, who takes a Hydro Pump and lives on 84 HP. It thunders and paralyzes Blastoise, who ends up being fully paralyzed the following turn, allowing the Nidorina to kill me in 3 thunders. So now I've got a sleeping Venusaur at decent HP versus a low HP Nidorina. Should be fine, right? Well, not really. It only wakes up the turn after getting hit by an Ice Beam, and then gets hit by another crit Ice Beam. Down it goes, and that's a loss. Round 1, Koga beats me. That's quite embarrassing, but let's try again. I lead off with Blastoise, and he sends out Weezing. I know it can Thunderbolt me, so I swap into Venusaur, who takes the hit very well. I Leech Seed the Weezing, who then gives me a critical hit Fire Blast and a burn. I withdraw Venusaur, thinking I can use it as fodder later on. Charizard gets poisoned by the sludge, of course, but I decide to boost my attack with Swords Dance before going straight into Earthquakes. Thunderbolt brings me below half, so I know I'll be dead in another turn. Fortunately, the Sword Dance upped my attack enough for Earthquake to kill Weezing. Venomoth comes out, but Fire Blast should be able to destroy it, critical hit or no. Its last Pokemon is a Nidorino, who also falls to one Earthquake. Koga round two's team looks more impressive, and he leads with a Hypno, who gets burned by Charizard. His Psychic in return crits, so I decide to just leave Charizard in as fodder. He survives another Psychic, which allows him to bring the Hypno to a shared 3 HP. Hypno takes me out, but doesn't take burn damage because that's how it works here in Generation 1. I know he'll die of the burn this turn, so I use Mimic on Blastoise, trying to angle for Psychic to use against his poison types, but of course I get the rather useless Hypnosis. Out comes Tangela, who tries to Solar Beam me, but dies to 2 Blizzards before it can get it off. Venomoth's Psychic crits and lowers my special, but Blastoise in return crits with Blizzard. It dies to another Psychic, which leaves my full HP Venusaur versus a low HP Venomoth, whose Psychic doesn't do much. Body Slam paralyzes it, and I'm able to kill it with another hit. I feared Sabrina more than any other gym leader because of how strong Psychic types are in Generation 1. Nothing resists it, and they are only weak to Bug, which virtually means they are weak to nothing. Round 1 starts off pretty well, with Charizard burning her Hypno. Unfortunately, it puts me to sleep and nearly kills me with Dream Eater. I have to switch out, and Venusaur eats the confusion before taking it out. Alakazam's Psybeam does a decent chunk and would have taken me out in another turn. I decide to switch into Charizard as Cannon Fodder, who promptly gets whacked. Enter Blastoise, who eats a Toxic before body slamming and killing the Alakazam in 2 turns. Sabrina sends in Jinx, who dies to 2 body slams. Round 1, Sabrina down. Her round 2 team has 4 Psychic types and 2 normal. She leads with Snorlax, always a bastard. It manages to Thunderbolt and Ice Beam my Charizard down, but I got it low enough for Venusaur's Razor Leaf to cut through its boosted special. Out comes Alakazam, and its Psychic does massive damage to Venusaur. Luckily, I managed to paralyze it with Body Slam, and the lucky paralysis allows me to finish it off. Hypno is a bit bulkier, so I decide to lead sheet it. Mega Kick crits and takes me out, so it's up to Blastoise to take the match. Hypno puts me to sleep and eats my dreams until I die. The second attempt goes much the same way. She leads with Snorlax, who dies to Charizard's physical attacks. Out comes Alakazam, and I switch into Blastoise to save Charizard for some reason. Blastoise dies to 3 Psychics, but only manages to deal around 40% to Alakazam. Venusaur fares even worse, bringing Alakazam down to 91 HP, but dying in the process. All I have left now is a low HP Charizard, and you can guess how this goes. I decide to start with Venusaur now on the next try, and she leads with Wigglytuff, a significant improvement over Snorlax. Razor Leaf does about half, but so does its Body Slam. My next Razor Leaf doesn't kill it, and it gets a paralysis on its Body Slam. Venusaur tanks the next one and hangs on with 15 HP before killing it. She brings out Mr. Mime, who psychics me to death. Blastoise takes 2 Psychics and nearly kills the Mr. Mime with Body Slams, who for some reason does a Solar Beam. I bring in Charizard, Solar Beam does nothing, and I kill the Mr. Mime with an Earthquake. Okay, I'm in a good position now, hopefully good enough to take on the Alakazam, who starts off with a Reflect. My Earthquake now only does about 15% damage, and its Psychic deals over half my HP. The next Psychic narrowly avoids killing me, and I'm able to bring Alakazam down to 125 HP before dying. My Blastoise has yellow HP and is outsped, so I have at most 2 turns to win. Psychic brings me to 13 HP, so I have to either crit or paralyze it, and I get a paralysis. I fear Body Slam might not be enough to take it down when Reflect is up, so I opt to take a risk and go for the 85% accurate Hydro Pump, which fortunately hits and kills the Alakazam. This is the closest victory I've had so far. Blaine never impressed me as a challenge, as I have 2 Pokemon who can deal super effective moves to fire types. Round 1 Blaine has also 2 normal types, but they shouldn't be an issue. I lead with Blastoise, who gets paired off against his Charizard. For some reason he doesn't swap out and slashes me. Hydro Pump misses the first time, but the second time it one-shots the Charizard. Out comes Clefable, which is almost certainly rocking Thunder or Thunderbolt, so I switch out into Venusaur. Predictably, the Thunderbolt does almost no damage. The next turn it uses Thunder Wave, which is slightly annoying but not really an issue. The Fire Blast might have been, but it missed the first time. The second time, however, it crits, nearly killing Venusaur, who gets fully paralyzed to boot. I have to switch out or lose it, and I'm sure Charizard can handle the Fire Blast. But Clefable opts for a super effective Ice Beam. Oh well, Earthquake takes care of it, and likewise for the Arcanine, who can't really do anything to Charizard anyway, except crit or paralyze with Body Slam. His round 2 team is weird, consisting of 3 fire types, a Chansey, and 2 grass types. I guess they do counter water Pokemon pretty well. Charizard faces off against Charizard, and while I can't really do much against his, I figured he'd be in the same position and switch out. Nope, he slashes me and I'm left doing submission for almost no damage. I have to switch out, and Blastoise takes a couple of slashes to the face before taking out the Charizard. His Magmar probably knows some cover moves, but I don't really have any plays to make here except hope Hydro Pump takes it out before I go down. After a special drop and no crit, I decide to swap out and sacrifice Charizard to restore Blastoise's special. In comes Venusaur, who should be able to take any hit Magmar can dish out, barring crits. Its Psychic does a decent chunk, but Body Slam is enough to kill it. I'm left against a Rapidash, who foolishly goes for Horn Drill, which misses. I paralyze it with Body Slam, a track which leads me to victory. Giovani shouldn't be a problem for the 3 starters, and in round 1 his team consists of ground and normal types, who should go down very easily. Persian dies to Charizard's physical attacks, and while Nidoqueen takes a big chunk of its HP with Surf, down it goes to 2 Earthquakes. Nidoking finally takes it out with Blizzard, but not before getting severely injured, making it easy prey for Blastoise's Hydro Pump. His round 2 team is much more varied, keeping Persian, Nidoking, and Queen, and adding Tauros, Moltres, and Gengar. He leads with Moltres, and again I keep my Charizard in against another Fire Flying type to which I can't do anything. I get poisoned and deal no damage to it, even after 3 Sword stances, because of Fly. I die a well-deserved, ignominious death. Blastoise's Hydro Pump misses, but so does Fire Blast. The next turn it hits, and I get poisoned, before body slamming it, and it survives, being able to fly up and letting me take poison damage. I Mimic, which fails for some reason. Moltres finally goes down, but it has taken a heavy toll on my team. Persian will outspeed Blastoise, and the poison damage is ticking, so I switch into Venusaur, who dies to a few slashes. Blastoise is able to finally take it out, and it's getting pretty close now. If Hydro Pump doesn't kill it, I'm in trouble. It doesn't, and Nidoking goes for Thunder, which fortunately misses. One more Body Slam takes it out, and round 2 Giovani was a much closer win than I anticipated. Okay, that concludes the actual gym leaders part. Apart from some embarrassing and unlucky losses, it wasn't all too bad actually. Our 3 starters performed roughly as expected. Will they fare as well against the Elite Four and the rival? Let's see. Lorelei 1's team were all water and or ice types, which means I should have a pretty easy victory, considering the type advantages I have against them. We start with Venusaur versus Dugong, which ends up as you'd expect. Out comes Cloyster, but it doesn't survive a single Razor Leaf, and neither does her Slowbro. We're off to a great start here. Lorelei 2 has a way more exotic team, containing only 2 ice types, Articuno and Cloyster, 2 water types, Starmie and Omastar, and for some reason a Wigglytuff and an Exeggutor. I lead with Charizard and she with Starmie, so I have to switch into Venusaur, who gets paralyzed immediately. She promptly switches it out for an Articuno, which is pretty bad news, honestly. My Razor Leaf does almost nothing, so I swap into Blastoise, who I thought could easily take on an Articuno. I outspeed it, and my Blizzard only does about 25% damage. I get poisoned, and she swaps into her Starmie, who I paralyze with a Body Slam. I fear the Thunderbolt, so I bring in Venusaur again. A bad move, because Starmie goes for the super effective Psychic, which also lowers my special. The next hit takes out Venusaur, and it's up to Blastoise now to save the day. Body Slam doesn't do much, and Starmie crits with a Psychic, nearly taking me out. The next turn, Blastoise goes down and Stormy is left at 101 HP. I've only got a Charizard left against her full team. I've got a bad feeling about this. I fail to kill Stormy with an Earthquake, and I get paralyzed again. Surf doesn't kill me in one go, so I can at least take out the Stormy. Omastar outspeeds and kills me with an Ice Beam. Ouch. My second attempt went better. Ashley leads with Omastar, who gets promptly Razor Leafed back into its grave. Next up is a Wigglytuff, who evades the first Razor Leaf and freezes Venusaur with a Blizzard, effectively taking it out of the battle. Both switch out, and Charizard gets paired off against Cloyster. Critical hit Fire Blast seals its fate, and it's back to Wigglytuff, who dies to 2 hits. Honestly, if she had a Stormy instead of a Cloyster, I'm pretty sure this would have been another loss. Bruno 1 goes all in on the rock and fighting Pokemon, which again bodes well for my setup. Its Machamp uses Hyper Beam, but Blastoise takes it with ease and knocks it out with 2 Hydro Pumps. His Rhydon gets one shot, and he's down to Hitmonlee. I decide to Body Slam it because I figured Hydro Pump wouldn't be a one-hit knockout. I take a high jump kick to the face, but easily survive it and proceed to knock it out the next turn. Bruno 2 has only 2 fighting Pokemon, Machamp and Hitmonlee, 1 Rock-type Rhydon, and a Clefable, Muk, and Slowbro. We start off the match with Charizard against Muk, and I decide to do a Sword Stance. Muk says fuck you and explodes in my face, which I narrowly survive. Out comes Hitmonlee, who I should outspeed, so I go for an Earthquake. It crits, but even so, Hitmonlee survives and takes out Charizard. Venusaur should be able to finish it and proceeds to do just that with a Razor Leaf. Machamp goes for Hyper Beam, but falls to 3 Razor Leaves. Agatha 1's team is 100% Poison type, but of course various secondary typings thrown in. Venusaur and Blastoise already had their time to shine, so now it's Charizard's turn, who gets paired off against her Gengar. Earthquake should deal significant damage, and it comes very close to defeating it in one hit. Unfortunately, it Confuse Rays me, and I can see this rapidly getting out of control, so I decide to switch into Venusaur, and so does she. Those are some mind tricks right there. How did she know I was going to switch out? If I hadn't, it would have been Charizard versus her Venusaur. Anyway, I go for Body Slam, while she opts for a heavily resisted Razor Leaf. We both switch out the next turn again, and it's Charizard against Muk. Earthquake deals a decent amount of damage and should be a 2-hit knockout, but it Body Slams, crits, and paralyzes me. Agatha then withdraws her Muk and brings back the Gengar. Fortunately, I could attack and land the Earthquake, easily killing it. Out comes the Venusaur, who Leech Seeds me. Charizard isn't having any of that shit though, and kills it with a Fire Blast. Muk uses Sludge, and I get fully paralyzed, so I chose to switch out the Charizard for some reason. Blastoise takes the Sludge very well, and Hydro Pump finishes the match. Agatha 2 keeps the Gengar, Venusaur, and Arbok, and gets a Gyarados, Jinx, and the dreaded Alakazam as well. I lead with Charizard, who should be able to deal significant damage to her Gengar, but she neatly swaps in her Gyarados, rendering Earthquake useless. I can feel the Thunderbolt or Surf coming, so I switch into Venusaur. Razor Leaf looks like it'll be a 3-hit knockout, but Gyarados' coverage is broad and it Fire Blasts me for around 60% HP. I have to switch into Blastoise, and I use Mimic in the hopes of learning Thunderbolt. Unfortunately, I get the pointless Surf. Mimic really sucks here and is such a random and luck-based move, it's really not worth it. Thunderbolt nearly takes me out, and the next turn I just go for Body Slam, which fully paralyzes it. Another Thunderbolt would spell my doom, so I go back into Venusaur, and fortunately Gyarados is again paralyzed. Razor Leaf doesn't kill it in one turn, so I take another Fire Blast to the face. Bye bye Venusaur. Anyway, Blastoise finishes it off and gets paired against her Venusaur. I could Blizzard it, but I'm sure the Razor Leaf would finish me off, so I switch into Charizard. She starts to power up a Solar Beam, which is really ideal. I use this opportunity to do a Sword Stance, because as you can see, Solar Beam does pitiful damage. One critical hit Fire Blast takes out the Venusaur, and then we're down to just a Gengar. It confuses me, but Charizard pulls through, and because of the earlier Sword Stance, one-shots the Gengar with Earthquake. This went rather well and could have gone much worse. Lance 1's team contains pretty much all the Dragon-esque Pokemon in this generation, such as Gyarados, Aerodactyl, Charizard, and Dragonair, but for some reason there isn't a Dragonite in sight. Very weird. Instead, he has a Lapras and a Kangaskhan. Anyway, the match starts with Blastoise versus Gyarados. I can't do much to it, but I get very lucky and freeze it with Blizzard. Lance switches it out, brings in Lapras. I went for Mimic, hoping to get Gyarados' Thunderbolt, but I get a Confuse Ray instead. I use it on Lapras, who just Thunderbolts me for about 40% damage. Blastoise goes for Body Slam, which does really low damage. I switch out Blastoise, thinking Venusaur would be the better choice, as it takes the Thunderbolt with ease. Lance switches out his Lapras, brings in Aerodactyl. I used Leech Seed, thinking the Lapras's high HP would be a neat source of recovery. I should have just attacked with Razor Leaf, but oh well. Aerodactyl starts to power up for Sky Attack, which was almost definitely one-shot Venusaur. It doesn't die to one Razor Leaf, so now I'm in trouble. I have to switch out into Blastoise, and fortunately Sky Attack misses. It then goes for a critical hit Hyper Beam, which nearly kills me. Hydro Pump takes it out, and we're back to the Lapras. In comes Venusaur, whose Razor Leaf it just cannot take. All that's left now is to finish off the frozen Gyarados, and we're done. Pretty easy, but Lance 2 was a whole other story. Look at this ridiculous team composition. The world's greatest dragon trainer doesn't have a single actual dragon type. I fully expected a Dragonite, or at least a Dragonair, but nope. He's got a team which you'd expect more from the rival, consisting of Arcanine, Snorlax, Lapras, Electabuzz, Charizard, and Kangaskhan. Very random. On my first go, he leads with Snorlax, who sets up Amnesia while getting Leech Seeded. I use Mimic, trying to learn Amnesia, but end up with Earthquake. Razor Leaf crits, so it ignores the Amnesia boosts. Its Double Edge does a decent chunk, but with Leech Seed and the recoil damage, I'm getting it low enough that it should die the next turn. And it does, by using Self-Destruct and killing my Venusaur. Well played, Mr. Dragon Trainer. Charizard versus Lapras isn't a favorable matchup, but I wanted to keep Blastoise for its other Pokemon, so decided to stay in and do some damage. Ice Beam freezes me, and the next turn I go down. The only way I can win now is with some seriously lucky critical hit Body Slams, but nope. His Body Slam, on the other hand, does paralyze me. Psychic lowers my special, and I can already see defeat looming. We took it out for a few more turns, but down I go. The second attempt goes much the same way, with Lapras again being the main obstacle, freezing with Ice Beam, critting and lowering special with Psychic, and being an all-around nuisance. I do manage to take it out with a Razor Leaf, but my low HP Venusaur and Blastoise don't really stand a chance against his Charizard, who just seismic tosses its way to victory. On my third attempt, I face a team of Snorlax, Lapras, and Arcanine. This time, I decide to lead with Charizard, but Snorlax again self-destructs and kills it. Venusaur gets paired against Lapras, which is the ideal scenario, honestly. I'll die, but might be able to take it down with me. Two Razor Leaves take it down, so now I've got a low HP Venusaur and a full HP Blastoise for his Arcanine. It kills Venusaur with Flamethrower, and then digs and avoids the Hydro Pump. On the next turn, Hydro Pump crits and takes it out, but I doubt the crit matters. I could have taken several more hits, so it would have been a win regardless. Okay, this was more of a challenge than I anticipated, but nothing too bad. We're down to the last battle, our rival. Rival 1's team has the expected mix of types: Executor, Slowbro, Ninetales, Clefable, Electabuzz, and Pinsir. In the first attempt, I'm faced with Pinsir, Electabuzz, and Clefable. Blastoise can't really do much to Pinsir, so I swap into Charizard, who gets poisoned. One Fire Blast later, the rival sends out Electabuzz. I decide to stay in and Earthquake, which doesn't kill it. Thunderbolt isn't enough to take me out, so another Earthquake seals its fate. Clefable takes a submission to the face before knocking me out with a Blizzard. Blastoise returns the favor, and a crit Blizzard wins the match. For some reason, Rival 2's team is exactly the same, his Pokemon just have better stats. This time he leads with Slowbro, who's a decent matchup against Venusaur. Razor Leaf kills it in 2 turns, and out comes Executor. I swap into Charizard, who takes 2 Psychics to the face before killing it with Fire Blast. We're down to just his Clefable, who takes noticeably less damage from submission and kills me with a Psychic. Venusaur wins the match with 2 Razor Leafs after evading a Blizzard. There we go. Round 2 rival clear, and with that, the entire Gym Leader Castle. All in all, this wasn't too much of a challenge. I've been defeated on multiple occasions, but never did it take more than 3 attempts to triumph. Sure, I've gotten lucky more than once, scoring a crit here and there, which may have determined the victory, but I've received at least an equal amount of bad RNG. Can you defeat the Pokemon Stadium Gym Leader Castle Round 2 using just the starter Pokemon Charizard, Blastoise and Venusaur? Definitely. If you like this kind of content and want to see more, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. See you in the next video.